has been declassified and released is irrefutable. I'm going to let Karoline speak to Secretary Rubio.
I'll speak to
The intelligence that's been declassified and made public leaves no room for denial. Karoline Leavitt wasn't just answering questions during this latest press briefing, she was delivering a masterclass in shutting down spin with precision. When Kaitlan Collins from CNN tried to stir up controversy and press her narrative, Karoline didn't just respond. She dismantled the entire premise. What began as a typical back and forth in the briefing room turned into a complete unraveling of the media's favorite talking points. Kaitlan came in with her usual confidence, armed with rehearsed lines and carefully crafted implications, but she underestimated just how ready Karoline and Tulsi Gabbard were. Director Tulsi Gabbard had just referenced earlier intelligence reports, including the 2017 report signed off by every Republican on the Senate Intelligence Committee, even Marco Rubio, who was acting chair at the time and is now Secretary of State. Rubio had made a statement back then acknowledging the troubling nature of what was uncovered, namely that Russia did indeed meddle in the 2016 election. But the real question, the one Karoline wasn't going to let slide, was about the spin placed on that report. While Rubio had confirmed Russian interference, he never claimed there was collusion between Trump and Russia, which is exactly what Democrats and many media outlets pushed as fact for years. Kaitlan Collins tried to trap Tulsi, accusing her of releasing evidence now just to win points with the president. The implication being that her bombshell revelations about the Obama administration were nothing more than political theater. But Tulsi didn't blink. She calmly corrected Kaitlan, pointing out that the Senate Intelligence Committee and the Office of the Director of National Intelligence are two entirely separate entities with distinct roles. It was a basic mistake on Collins' part, akin to confusing your accountant with your lawyer. Tulsi's correction wasn't just a minor rebuttal, it exposed a serious lack of understanding or deliberate misinformation from someone who should have known better. After setting the record straight, Tulsi handed the floor to Karoline Leavitt, and that's when the real takedown began. Karoline picked up seamlessly where Tulsi left off, reinforcing the point that while Rubio acknowledged Russian meddling, what was ignored at the time, and what Democrats didn't want to talk about, was the intelligence community pushing a false narrative about Trump colluding with Russia. The narrative that Trump's son held secret meetings with Russian operatives. The narrative that the president was compromised. Lies that were pushed relentlessly, now completely debunked. Karoline didn't just respond to Kaitlan's accusations. She turned them inside out, calling out the selective outrage that defined so much of the media's coverage during the Trump years. The same people who screamed about democracy being under threat were the ones who pushed and verified opposition research as fact. One of the most glaring examples was the Steele dossier, a document the FBI leaned on heavily without confirming its validity. A document that was later revealed to have been funded by the Clinton campaign. But during its peak, it was treated like a sacred text, breathlessly reported on every network, repeated in monologues, turned into memes and punchlines. It was the silver bullet, until it wasn't. Karoline called out the media for their role in this fiasco. Night after night, they ran with the Steele dossier claims, refusing to question its origins or verify its contents. Even late-night comedians helped normalize it. When the truth emerged that the dossier was unsubstantiated, a political weapon disguised as intelligence, the same outlets that had amplified it fell silent. No retractions, no accountability, just a quiet pivot to the next story. When Kaitlan Collins tried once more to challenge the motivations behind Tulsi's report release, Karoline shut that down too. She asked simply who exactly was claiming Tulsi released the information to boost her standing with the president. Because outside of the journalists in that room, no one was saying that. And those same journalists were the ones who had spent years fostering division and distrust by feeding the public false narratives. Karoline pointed out that it wasn't just the media that failed. It was key government officials, people like James Clapper, James Comey, and Andrew McCabe, who knew better. These individuals were then hired by the very networks that once reported their narratives uncritically, giving them platforms to continue spreading the same disinformation they helped create. She laid out how the Obama administration omitted a crucial presidential daily briefing in December 2016, one that would have contradicted the Russia collusion narrative. That report was never released until just days ago. And why? The implication was clear. If Trump, then the president-elect, had seen it, the entire collusion storyline might have unraveled before it could take hold. Karoline wasn't speculating blindly. She presented a timeline, clear motives, and a pattern of coordinated behavior between political operatives and the media. She reminded everyone that Donald Trump had been receiving intelligence briefings as president-elect, and that if this omitted document had been shared, it could have changed everything. Instead, the narrative was protected, preserved, and weaponized. The deception wasn't accidental. It was strategic. Karoline directly addressed the accusation that Director Gabbard's assessment release was politically motivated. She stated firmly that the president had full confidence in Director Gabbard and always had. The only people questioning her credibility were the very same media figures who'd been complicit in pushing falsehoods. The media couldn't accuse Gabbard of playing politics without acknowledging their own partisan track record. And as Karoline continued, she dropped another bombshell. She called out how the same media that once touted the Steele dossier now housed the very people who created and spread the falsehoods. They weren't just accessories to a lie. They were co-authors. Kaitlan then made another attempt to cast doubt, referencing a moment when President Trump had corrected Gabbard over Iran policy. Karoline responded immediately, noting that the president respected every member of his cabinet and that one exchange didn't signify a lack of trust. Again, she flipped the narrative on its head. The only people questioning the unity of Trump's team were the journalists trying to pit them against each other. And it wasn't working. The press had spent years pointing fingers, but never once looked in the mirror. Karoline changed that. She spoke not just to the room, but to the public watching from home, the voters who had been told for years that their president was compromised, who had watched headline after headline slowly unravel into nothing. Karoline wasn't asking for apologies. She was demanding accountability. She brought up Barack Obama directly, suggesting that people around him, top-level officials with access to classified intelligence, knew that the collusion narrative was built on shaky ground but went along with it anyway. The implication: they could have stopped the misinformation train but chose instead to fuel it. As the questions kept coming, Karoline didn't waver. When asked whether the Supreme Court's recent immunity decision might protect Obama from prosecution, she didn't speculate. Instead, she reminded the room that while it's up to the courts to decide legal consequences, what mattered now was the pursuit of truth and justice. There must be a reckoning. The people who led the country down this path of division didn't just make a mistake. They orchestrated a campaign of disinformation. She named names. Adam Schiff, who had gone on national television implying he had damning evidence against Trump. But when pushed for specifics, he delivered none. And yet, no major outlet held him accountable. Instead, they echoed his statements uncritically, feeding the illusion of collusion. Hillary Clinton herself had called Trump a puppet for Putin. Tim Kaine had likened him to a Russian defense lawyer. All of it designed to paint Trump as compromised, dangerous, and illegitimate. The media didn't investigate these claims with skepticism. They embraced them. They broadcast them with urgency and conviction. And now, years later, as the truth surfaces, they want to move on like it never happened. Karoline Leavitt isn't letting that happen. She's forcing the press to reckon with its own role in one of the most misleading narratives in modern political history. This wasn't just sloppy reporting or innocent misjudgment. It was intentional. A weaponization of information, a coordinated attack on a sitting president, and an effort to sway public opinion under false pretenses. The media chose sides. They traded objectivity for influence. And now, as the walls close in around the lie they helped build, Karoline is holding their feet to the fire. She's not just defending Trump, she's defending the truth. She's standing up against years of deception and manipulation, reminding the American people that their faith in democracy was betrayed not by tweets, but by the very institutions that claim to be its defenders. As she wrapped up, it was clear that this wasn't just another press briefing. It was a turning point. Karoline Leavitt showed that accountability is coming. Not just for politicians, but for the journalists who abandon their duty in pursuit of a storyline. The American people deserve better, and thanks to Karoline, they are finally getting it. What she delivered wasn't just a rebuttal, it was a reckoning. She's not just pushing back, she's pulling back the curtain and exposing everything the press tried to keep hidden. She reminded us all that truth isn't a partisan weapon, it's a responsibility. And she's not backing down until it's honored.